Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, teacher. We are Group 3 and welcome to our group report presentation about Vietnam Airlines. My name is Thảo Vi and I'm going to start our presentation by introducing about Vietnam Airlines and discuss our analysis about the balance sheet of Vietnam Airlines in 3 consecutive years, 2019, 2020, and 2021. So, established on 1995, Vietnam Airlines JSC is one of the most active and promising Vietnam Airlines in the Southeast Asia. With an average of 400 flights per day, Vietnam Airlines connects major cities around the world with enchanting tourist landing places in Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and Myanmar. So, in terms of the company size, Vietnam Airlines is a large-scale and stay-on airline in Vietnam. And in the stock exchange market, the ticker symbol for Vietnam Airlines is HVN, which is listed by Ho Chi Minh City Stock Exchange. Talking about the membership of the company's board of directors, Mr. Đặng Ngọc Hoa is currently the chairman of Vietnam Airlines. Along with the board members, they are Mr. Lê Hồng Hà, Mr. Lê Trường Giang, Mr. Nguyễn Xuân Minh, Mr. Tạ Mạnh Hùng, and Mr. Tomochi Ishii. Also, Mr. Lê Hồng Hà is the president and the CEO of Vietnam Airlines. About the majority-owned subsidiaries, at the end of 2021, the company owns 15 subsidiaries and the 4 biggest ones ranked by size are Pacific Airlines JC, Vietnam Airlines Engineering Limited, Vietnam Air Petrol Limited, and Nội Bài Cargo Terminal Services JCs. And now we're going to move to the analysis of profit and loss and balance sheet in 3 consecutive years, 2019, 2020, and 2021 of Vietnam Airlines. About the current asset changes. Observing the chart over here, considering the period between 2019 and 2021, we can see that the amount of total current assets of Vietnam Airlines experienced a downward fluctuation from around 19 trillion 288 billion Vietnam dong in 2019 to around 11 trillion 356 billion Vietnam dong in 2021. Also, we can see that the amount of the current assets did not comprise a large proportion of Vietnam Airlines asset structure, with only 25.4% of the total assets in 2019 and to only 18% at the end of 2021. About the total non-current assets changes, we can see in the chart over here that there is a rapid decrease in the total amount of non-current assets of Vietnam Airlines during the 3 mentioned years. This fall in non-current assets were primarily due to the influence of COVID-19 because the pandemic has resulted in a significant reduction in the number of air flights. However, according to the common side balance sheet, the non-current assets still accounted for a large percentage of the total assets of Vietnam Airlines. Moreover, the fixed assets such as airplanes and equipment cover the largest quantity of the total non-current assets, and according to the restructuring plan of Vietnam Airlines from 2021 to 2025, the company would reduce the fleet size during the mentioned period, negotiate to extend, postpone, or cancel a number of lease and purchase contracts for new aircraft. Now we're going to talk about the total current liability changes. So there was a constant increase in the total amount of current liabilities of Vietnam Airlines between the 3 years. Moreover, current liabilities cover a large portion of the total liabilities and equity at around 41.1% in 2019 and up to around 65% in 2021. According to the Vietnam Net, the majority of current liabilities of Vietnam Airlines were onto the aircraft rental, fuel, engine repair, and flight service of foreign partners. Now we're going to move to total non-current liability changes. So on the whole, the total amount of non-current liabilities of Vietnam Airlines experienced a decline during the 3 years. And it can be inferred from the table that the current liabilities are reduced from 26 trillion Vietnam dong in 2019 to only around 21 trillion Vietnam dong in 2021. And about its total stockholder equity changes overall, we can see that there was a tremendous plummet in the total stockholder equity of Vietnam Airlines. This is because Vietnam Airlines underwent the danger of equity negativity. However, thanks to the support of the government, helped raise the capital by 8,000 billion Vietnam dong. Vietnam Airlines finally managed to overcome having negative equity and maintain the present figure on the stock exchange at the end of 2021. So, to conclude, in terms of the assets and liabilities efficiency, Vietnam Airlines is trying their best to solve the current stormy situation by applying a new policy, reducing the fleet size by selling aircraft, which they hope can help them recover from the influence that the COVID-19 pandemic left behind. Moreover, the new policy is also announced to be Vietnam Airlines' effort to improve and reconstruct their system for better service and safety insurance for customers.
So I'm Hương, and about the comparison to the competitor, we choose to compare Vietnam Airlines with Vietjet Air, which is Vietnam Airlines' major direct competitor. So in the comparison of balance sheet analysis, There are three parts. The first part is about the comparison in asset structure. So the only similarity between Vietnam Airlines and Vietjet Air assets is that the total asset decreased in 2020 and recovered in 2021. In contrast, there are several differences between the two companies' assets. Firstly, Vietnam Airlines had more non-current assets than the current assets. However, Vietjet Air had more current assets than the non-current one. This means that Vietnam Airlines focused more on the long-term goals, while Vietjet Air concentrated more on the short-term goals. So, secondly, the gaps between the two asset types of Vietnam Airlines and Vietjet Air were also the big difference. In Vietnam Airlines, the gaps between current and non-current asset was large in all 3 years. The non-current assets were 3 times, 6.6 times, and 4.5 times more than the current assets in 2019, 2020, and 2021 in turns. Moreover, the second part is about the liability structure, and this aspect only recorded differences between Vietnam Airlines and Vietjet Air. The first difference is that Vietnam Airlines had more current than the non-current asset, the non-current liability in all 3 years, whereas Vietjet had more current liability in 2019, around 56.5%, and 2020, 65.6%, and more non-current liability in 2021, 55.4%. In addition, Vietnam Airlines has an increasing trend in current liability and decreasing trend in non-current liabilities, while Vietjet Air has a downward trend in current liabilities from around 19,200 trillion Vietnam dong in 2019 to 15,500 trillion Vietnam dong in 2021, and a growing tendency in non-current liability from 15,700 trillion Vietnam dong in 2019 to 19,300 trillion Vietnam dong in 2021. Eventually, in regards to the stockholders' equity, the tendency is the major difference between the two companies. While Vietnam Airlines witnessed a significant reduction in stockholder equity, roughly 18,000 trillion Vietnam dong, Vietjet Air's stockholder equity had a growth trend over the 3 years. The number increased by nearly 1,995 trillion Vietnam dong, from around 14,900 trillion Vietnam dong to around 16,800 trillion Vietnam dong, as can be seen from the chart. So this is the end of my part. Next part will be presented by Hoàng Anh.
Thanks for introducing me. My name is Da Hằng Anh. And in my part, I will talk about the income statements of Vietnam Airlines in 3 years. Firstly, I will talk about the total revenue change. In the face of the pandemic's complex, airlines have faced the prospect of border closure in many countries, so that the decreasing revenues from sale and service cannot be avoided. And as a result, compared to the revenue in 2019, Vietnam Airlines net revenues has significantly decreased by 97 trillion Vietnam dong in 2020 and 70 trillion Vietnam dong in 2021. So now we will move to the cost of goods sold change. The cost of goods sold can be considered as an expense, but it is not included in the expense line because the IRS allow deducting the cost of goods sold from taxable earnings. So that I will talk about
this part first, and then I will talk about the expense change later. In 2019, the cost of goods sold were 88.83%. However, in 2020 and 2021, the price of gasoline and the number of manufacturers labor significantly decreased. So that is leads to the increase from 88.83% in 2019 to 118.35% in 2020 and 135.89% in 2021. As you know that total revenues minus total expense equals net profits. So that an increase in cost of goods sold can make the tax bill lower, but it also make a lower profits. So that to increase profits, Vietnam Airlines should be reduce the cost of goods sold. Now let's move to the expense change. The operating expense of Vietnam Airlines had increased from 9.76% in 2019 to 12.9% in 2020 and to 16.3% in 2021. The significant increase in operating expense has made Vietnam Airlines lost 31.25% in 2020 and 52.19% in 2021. Now I will accept the details of each side of expense to explain why the operating expense increased. Firstly is financial expense because the interest expense had decreased about 1% per year in 2020 and continued to decrease by 0.82% per year in 2021. So that as a result, the interest expense combined with the loss from investment leads to a decrease in financial expense from 2.344 billion Vietnam dong in 2019 to 1.668 billion in 2020 and decreased to 1.549 billion in 2021. Not only the financial expense change affect the total expense change, but also the selling, general, and administrative and other expense. The selling expense fluctuated in 3 years. Besides that, the general and administrative expense also increased from 2.69% to 3.6% and to 5.98% in 2020. And about the other expenses, the increase of other expense from 0.04% in 2019 to 0.18% in 2020 and to 0.42% in 2021. In order to reduce costs in 2021, the contracts with air lease operations has been adjusted to reduce the number of leased aircraft from 6 to 4 units. Vietnam Airlines intends to sell or sale and lease back all aircraft from 2022 to 2024 to restore and improve business results. So that is our expenses. Now I will talk about the non-operating gains and loss. Gains from investments and foreign exchange generated lead to a slight increase in non-operating gains and loss. The interest exemptions from paying late no longer apply, so that in 2021, non-operating gains and loss decreased significantly from 1 trillion Vietnam dong to 283 billion Vietnam dong. And the last one in my part is earning per share of Vietnam Airlines. In 2019, the EPS were 1.650 Vietnam dongs, which shows the company's head growth. However, in 2020 and 2021, the EPS is negative. It reflecting that the business is struggling in its core business due to the economic downturns, and the PE ratio in these 2 years is meaningless. And at this time, the company needs to use another way to evaluate the level of profitability. And during these 2 years, investor has been exposed to many risks. However, in contrast to Vietnam Airlines, VietJet on those, the EPS increased within 3 years, but the interest was still positive. And it reflects that VietJet is more valuable than Vietnam Airlines. So that is all my part. Now, the next part will be presented by Linh.
Hi, teacher. My name is Khánh Linh, and today I will present our financial report. In this report, we will on a financial analysis of Vietnam Airlines from 2019 to 2021, a period when COVID-19 has had a heavy impact on not only on the Vietnamese aviation industry, but also all over the world. I am responsible for analyzing the income statement with another team member and compare it with competitor, VietJet Air. Regarding the source of information, I use the official Vietjet Air business result report from the company website and a few other reliable newspapers to refer to the general situations at that time. And in the process of searching for information and looking at the business report, I can see that the revenue from the main activities of both companies has increased significantly. And to see how much these two companies increase and decrease compared to each other, I convert this exact number into percentages by using 2019 as a base, then taking the 2 other years revenue dividing by the base and multiply by 100. As for the expense, beside the business statement, I have calculated 2 separate tables for both Vietnam Airlines and Vietjet Air for easier comparison by taking the sum of the cost of goods sold, financial, selling, administrative, and other expenses. I then use this total to compare and leave these two detailed tables in the appendix 5 and 6. And similar to our revenue, the two company expenses have both plummeted because their businesses have been affected by the pandemic. According to the labor newspaper, despite a sharp decline in main business activities, in 2020, Vietjet Air still reported increased profit compared to the same period in 2019. And the reason for that was the pre-tax profits of the non-operating income from sales and leaseback activities and source of investment in PV oil. Despite the outstanding growth in 2020, Vietjet Air's non-operating gains dropped sharply a year later. This number of Vietnam Airlines also follows the same directions as Vietjet Air, although it does not increase as much as Vietjet Air in 2020, it still has a slight increase compared to the previous year before decreasing again in 2021. So this is the end of my part, and I hope you will have a great experience when watching our video and grading our report. Thank you so much. Next, my friends will introduce about our financial ratio of Vietnam Airlines from 2019 to 2021.
Thank you for introducing me. Now I will present the analysis of financial ratio to see the financial health of Vietnam Airlines compared to the competitor. First, we start with the liquidity ratio. According to more depth rule with the current ratio, a current ratio over 2 can be regarded as acceptable. Between 1 and 2 is considered satisfactory, and less than 1 is considered poor and can indicate liquidity issue. Based on the analysis of the Vietnam Airlines and Vietjet, the current ratio of Vietnam Airlines were lower than 1 in the period from 2019 to 2021, which means that Vietnam Airlines could not meet its short-term debt while Vietjet could handle it better. Vietnam Airlines at that stage. For the quick ratio, analyzing Vietnam Airlines has ratio that are on lower than 1 in on 3 years, which means they had to sell inventory to pay up the obligation. In contrast, Vietjet had a better situation when the ratio were on greater than 1. They were able to pay up the current short-term debt without selling inventory. It can be seen that the two company cash ratio are both down from the previous years. This indicated that on-run face many risks of short-term default because of insufficient cash. Secondly, about the efficiency ratio. Account receivable mainly consist of trade receivable. It can be seen that Vietnam Airlines had a higher ratio than Vietjet, which means that Vietnam Airlines had a more effective debt collection policy, and they had a higher percentage of high-quality customers who can quickly pay up their debts. In general, Vietnam Airlines total asset turnover ratio were higher than Vietjet in on 3 years, with higher asset turnover. Vietnam Airlines could generate more revenue per dollar invested in assets. However, the retail in both companies tended to decrease gradually during the 3 years. This may be because the aviation industry had been heavily affected by the COVID-19 epidemic in recent years, thereby both were unable to use assets effectively to generate profits. Thirdly, about the long-term solvency ratio. Vietnam Airlines had a higher total debt ratio than Vietjet in the period from 2019 to 2021. Moreover, Vietnam Airlines total debt ratio increased over 3 years, which means that Vietnam Airlines were facing more debt problems. As a result, Vietnam Airlines debt to equity ratio was significantly higher than Vietjet. Especially in 2021, the company, the ratio were very high. You can see it at 6,638.51%. This means that the company were having a harder time paying up its existing debts, and a higher debt to equity ratio could be a sign of future credit crisis, including defaults on debts or bonds. The equity multiplier is the rate by which investors can decide to invest in that company or not. Vietnam Airlines had an equity multiplier that has been increasingly steadily over 3 years and were higher than Vietjet, which means that its assets were financed by debt a lot. In contrast, Vietjet had fewer debt assets, which was seen as a positive because repayment costs are lower than direct competitors, and in this case, investors may consider investing in Vietjet rather than Vietnam Airlines. Next, TT will continue with the profitability and market value ratio.
Thank you for introducing me. My name is TT, and now we're going to talk about the other two ratios, profitability and market value. Firstly, profitability. As you can see on the screen, the percentages of Vietnam Airlines and Vietjet declined from 2019 to 2021. Vietnam Airlines ratio significantly fluctuated, especially in 2021. The company reported a loss of about 36% of the profits, and their owner earned 45% compared to 2019, and the a signal of company financial health. Like the competitor, Vietjet also reported a loss in 2020 to 2021, but basically went over Vietnam Airlines in general. In addition, Vietjet had a higher gross margin, indicating that the company managed the generated profits more efficiently than its competitor. Normally, higher number is better because a company wants to earn more profit for every $1 of sale that they get. Similar to gross margin, the net profit margin of Vietjet was more significant than Vietnam Airlines, although both brands had a reduction in their ratio. But I think it is difficult for Vietnam Airlines to deal with the risk of cost in the future because they cannot generate enough money from sales compared to Vietjet. Moving on return on asset and return on equity, we can see a low trend in the two ratio of two brands, and Vietnam Airlines had a strong decrease in both ratios, while Vietjet was more stable and fell a little bit. Also, we can see a return on asset of Vietjet was much higher than return on asset of Vietnam Airlines. So that's why its current debt was lower than Vietnam Airlines. On the other hand, return on equity of Vietnam Airlines suffered a heavy loss for 2 years, showing that they don't manage well to generate profits with the money that shareholders have invested. The last category is market value, including PE and EV multiple. Over 3 years, Vietjet had a higher PE ratio than Vietnam Airlines, which means investors have higher expectations for earning growth, and they are willing to pay more for Vietjet Airlines rather than Vietnam Airlines. In 2019, both ratios of two brands were in the same number, 20,
showing that the market value the company stock at the same level. However, from 2020 to 2021, affected by COVID-19, Vietnam Airlines PE ratio was meaningless because they have negative earnings per share as we have mentioned in the balance sheet. However, in differences, Vietjet was successful in difficult times. The PE ratio increased by 900 times compared to 2019. The final one is enterprise multiple. The enterprise multiple of Vietnam Airlines in 3 years were below 10. It was seen as healthy, while the number for Vietjet was much higher than 10. However, due to the lower ratio, Vietnam Airlines is undervalued. It means its market value cheaper than Vietjet. Fortunately, the ratio was improved in 2021. In conclusion, because of the influences of COVID-19, the asset structure and stockholder equity of Vietnam Airlines tend to decrease. However, short-term debt increased significantly, and in terms of liquidity ratios, Vietnam Airlines improved financial health and facing financial difficulties. One thing that Vietnam Airlines should not is that debt-to-equity ratio is increased very high, and which may affect their operations. Although it is undervalued in 2021, the loss situation have improved, creating a more positive financial situation. That's the end of my group financial analysis report. Thank you for listening.